video, I'm going to demonstrate the cable cast on in slow motion. And this is a cast on that you might want to use it as your regular everyday cast on, but you're really only going to use it if a pattern calls for it, because there's going to be a reason for it. A lot of times that reason is because you're casting on somewhere in a pattern where you only have one strand of yarn to work with. Because with, like the long tail cast on, we have to have two different strands of yarn to get that going. That's usually the beginning of a project cast on. This one just requires one strand of yarn, and I'll give you a close-up of what it looks like. It has a pretty twill look to it. It looks not that much different from a regular long tail cast on, but we have to trust the pattern designers are going to tell us when it's most used. But it's a good sturdy cast on, not especially stretchy, maybe a little bit stretchier. Anyway, I'm going to do it in slow motion so you can follow along. Let's take a look. Okay, in this swatch I have a cable cast on at the bottom, and you see that there's kind of a twill edge to it. One thing that's different from a long tail cast on or a knitted cast on is the right side there that I'm pointing to is kind of rounded. It doesn't have the really squared off corner that you see when you use a long tail cast on or a knitted cast on or other cast ons too. But I made this swatch to show you that it looks pretty good with if you're trying to match two ends of a scarf or something, it looks pretty good with a regular old pull one stitch over the other bind off. But for the most part, you're going to use this cast on when a pattern calls for it. Usually when you only have one strand of yarn to use, you're casting on in the middle of a project. And because we only need one strand of yarn, I can make a slip knot close to the end of the yarn. I don't have to leave a tail. I'm just going to leave about 6 inches so that I can weave in the end later. Get the first needle and get it in that slip knot. Tighten it up. Not too tight though. You'll see why. You do want to leave some space. And well, you don't want to pull this cast on tight at any point while you're working it. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to pull this slip knot close to the tip because I'm going to knit into the slip knot stitch. Just a regular old knit stitch. Pull it through. But instead of leaving it on the right needle where it normally goes, pull it a little long to give yourself some space and twist it around because we're going to put it back on the left needle. So that first stitch is kind of a knitted cast on stitch. We don't really start with the cable cast on until this next stitch. Now I'm putting the needle between those two stitches. Just kind of between the knitting and the left needle. I'm kind of wrenching it into there. It looks like I'm putting it in harder than it wasn't that hard to get it in there. It looks really dramatic in slow motion. Now I'm going to work a regular old knit stitch between those two stitches.
pull that stitch through, and again, keep pulling and pulling a little longer than you think you want it to be. Give it a little twist here. Get that left needle in there. The reason we're giving it a twist is to get it mounted onto the needle correctly. And putting the needle back between the next two stitches. And here it is. Again, it looks like I'm wrenching it into there. Wrapping the needle and pulling it through to make a knit stitch. You'll know right away if you're pulling things too tightly, because you really will have to wrench the needle between the two stitches. Giving it a twist around, getting that left needle in there. And then you see that first stitch is pretty loose at the tip of the needle. Wrapping it, pulling it through. Some extra room in there to twist it around. And I guess I should say that the tendency, if you work this for a while, you are going to want to keep things really close to the tips of the needles, or tip of the left needle at least. And that's because the tapered part of the needle is going to make it easier to get your needle in there to work this. And that's not a problem if you're an experienced knitter, but I know it will be a bit more time consuming if you are a newer knitter and you're having to keep your stitches further down, because newer knitters are more likely to have stitches just jump off the end of the needle when you didn't mean them to. But with practice and using the first finger of your left hand, and well, here goes my finger, keeping a grip on that stitch that's already on there while I get the next stitch on. Slow motion is educational for me too. I see what all my fingers are doing, the things that they do without me really putting thought into it. So between those two stitches, and if you're getting a lot of resistance, you might be splitting the stitch. If it's just tight, I mean, that's pretty normal. Wrap the needle and pull that through. Give it a twist. Get the left needle in there. Get the right needle out. I'm going to pull everything down onto the fuller part of the needle. That will even out the tension in the last stitch. Tighten up that last one because we left it loose. And I pointed out how the right side bottom edge, the right side of the cast on, has kind of a curve to it. It's not really straight, and you'll see here that it's because it's until the next stitch is made, that stitch is always leaning a bit to the left. So the last one leans a bit to the left. But I'm still fussing with it, trying to straighten it out a bit more. Yeah, tightening it up a little did help. And there's the cast on.
And that's it. I hope it helps. Good luck.